So this is going to be a presentation about generate, build, and deploy, really start to finish of an application. One thing that I've noticed when I go to a lot of meetups that talk about Angular is a lot of them focus on specifics of how to build an application in Angular, but not many people actually touch on how do you get started, how do you generate an app, and how do you get started, and then from there, how do I build an app to a complete working order, and then how do I actually get that application somewhere to host it. This is a very ambitious goal to happen in 1 hour. So I'm going to apologize up front because I will be moving very fast, just because there's a lot to cover. It's very ambitious. However, we're going to be using some tools that makes it really easy, really fast to get an app up and running very quickly. All those tools include Yeoman generators. I'm not sure if you guys have ever done much with Yeoman. So it's a fantastic tool. Another tool we're going to be using is a tool that I'm associated with called Form.io. We're going to be using that to very quickly bootstrap an app, get a login authentication. We're going to be able to build some resources, essentially have our entire API platform hosted on Form.io, and it's all going to work, and I'm going to show you how that works. Obviously, we're going to be doing a lot in AngularJS. This entire application is AngularJS. We'll be utilizing a tool called Gulp, which is a task runner. There's two variants. There's Gulp and then there's Grunt. How many are familiar with Gulp? A lot of people. How many use Grunt? Okay, so it's kind of half and half right now. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I have a preference for Gulp just because it actually gives me more power as a developer. It does a lot of things with streams, so I can like pipe certain streams to other tasks. It's really powerful. And then what I'd like to do is show you how you can set up Amazon S3 to host your application. So what's really impactful about the way we're going to be building this application is that we're going to be creating a distribution in a dist folder. And that distribution can be deployed anywhere, including GitHub Pages. We'll host it for free. You can use Amazon S3, which is what my preference, because you can put CloudFront in front of it, and then you get CDN distribution. But also keep in mind with this application we're building, you can also put this using Apache Cordova to compile it as like a native app on your mobile device. You can also use a tool called Electron, which you can build desktop applications with that dist folder as well. So really we're going to be building this app that's deployable anywhere, which is a very a major benefit. So as an introduction, my name is Travis Tidwell. I am the CTO and co-founder of a company called Form.io. We're based here in Dallas. We are growing. We're looking for help, so if any of you guys are interested, come and talk to me. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Software Gnome on Twitter, and also have a GitHub account under Travis T. I do a lot with open source. You'll see my profile has a lot of projects that I've been involved with. A lot of stuff we do is open source. Another thing that I like to do is I allow you to follow along if you guys are on the internet. You can follow along with this presentation. If you go to this bit.ly here, this is this entire presentation is available online. So let me tell you a little bit about Form.io. So Form.io is a new company, and what it is, it's a combined form and API data management platform that allows you to use a form builder to build forms, but you can do way more than just building forms. You can also build resources using a form. So in the process of building a form, you're constructing data structures that then define APIs. So while the front end of our product looks like a form builder, behind the scenes is definitely way more, and in fact it's an API platform. You can use it to construct your entire structure of your application, host all of the data within our API platform, and those forms can be easily embedded within your application. So right here you have the website where you can easily embed the forms. I also have these devices here just to illustrate that these forms can also be embedded within Apache Cordova applications and really kind of can exist on their own. And underneath all of this is a new way of doing forms on the web, this next generation of web forms. And what that is JSON renderings. It's a dynamic renderings of JSON schemas. So we take a schema that's in JSON format and dynamically render the form in the front end versus doing iframes. So what you end up with is a highly flexible, controllable form that you can manipulate with CSS, JavaScript, and have a lot of control. On the flip side of that, we also provide an API platform. So those forms automatically hook up to the backend API, where you can actually construct your APIs, utilize those APIs, and then hook that into a number of third-party services. We're adding more and more all the time, but you can also hook it into your own backend services. We will be using Form.io in this presentation, so you're going to get a really good taste of how powerful this tool really is. So let's actually move on to actually build something from start to finish. And I wanted to actually come up with a clever idea. So I was thinking about how can I build an app really quickly to illustrate the power of not only Form.io but also Yeoman, Gulp, Amazon S3. And so I was thinking about, wouldn't it be neat? So you have you take a group photo, and I bring up my phone and I take a picture of everyone in the audience to take a photo. But wouldn't it be even better if I was able to create a group and I told everyone in this audience to, instead of me taking a photo of you, just pull out your phones, join the group, and take a selfie of yourself. And that would actually splash and create a grid of images of selfies. And so instead of having a group photo, you have what's a group selfie. And I built this and deployed it on Amazon S3. And so you can actually go to this URL right here. This has logins, so I can actually log in. So there's authentication. And once I log in, I have a number of groups that I've created. One of those I've done before. So this is a group, and this works on your mobile phone. I could take a new selfie. There you see Gary making a lot of funny faces. But I've also created a new one called Meetup. And so while I'm giving this presentation, you guys can be trying this. Just go to groupselfie.us, create an account, and then once you create an account, just go join Group Selfie over here, and then just type Meetup. And do new selfie, and then you can take a selfie, and I think at the very end we can see how many people actually participated in that. But this is what we're going to be building, which incorporates a number of things. This incorporates authentication. This incorporates forms. As you see here, this is a Form.io form that's embedded in the app. And it also incorporates this nesting of resources, which is a very complex thing to do in an API. You have groups, and within groups you have selfies, and then they need to relate to one another. So that's what we're going to be building. So you can actually go there right there. Also, all of the source code I'm showing you is open source. You can just find it at Travis T. Group Selfie. And everything we're doing is open source, so you can view the source code. So we've got a lot to do, so let's go ahead and just dive right in. So we're actually going to get started with a tool called Yeoman. This is a Yeoman generator. What we're going to do is make sure we install that by typing npm install -yo. That's going to install it globally on your machine. So far so good, not too overwhelming. We're also going to use a very special generator called generator Gulp Angular. And what this actually does is it's a great generator that allows you to utilize Angular and Gulp in the same generator. I really like this generator. There are some changes I'd like to make to it, and I'll walk you through some of those changes in this presentation. But for the most part, this is, in my opinion, this one's spot on. There is a generator Angular, which is a little bit shorter to remember, but it uses Grunt, and it also doesn't structure the app as well as I prefer. I think this one gets you pretty close. So let's actually do something to install this. We're going to install Gulp. We're going to install Bower, and then we're going to install the generator using this npm install command. So I've already, in preparation for this meeting, I've already run those commands. Where I'm going to be picking up is I've created a folder, and I'm going to be running this Gulp Angular command to kind of show you how that works. So to begin with, you'll see I've got my IDE set up. This is Meetup, and it's empty. So this is an empty folder that I'm getting started with. And so inside here, as I'll show you, we have an empty folder, and I'm going to type yo Gulp Angular. So what this is actually going to do is this is going to ask me a bunch of questions, and this is what I love about Yeoman is it asks you questions and it kind of holds your hand through building a project. Some of those is like, which version of Angular do you want to use? I know that there's 1.5 already, which we'll be upgrading here in a little bit. But for now, we're just going to say 1.4. At that point, it asks you, what plugins would you want? I'm just going to disable some of the ones that we're not going to be using. I typically like to keep sanitized because that allows you to do HTML injection. I also like to use Angular 2x, and then this actually asks, hey, what ng resource would you like to use, or REST Angular? I think these are great, and I actually used to use REST Angular all the time, but I've actually gotten to a point now where I just prefer to use HTTP. It's close enough to dealing with REST APIs that you don't really need the other stuff. So I usually just like to say HTTP. And then from there, I always use UI router. It's the better one. There is ng route, which is the official router. But they put this one first for a reason, is because it's just a way more powerful routing system within Angular. So I hit enter on that as well. Obviously, you're going to use Bootstrap. And then also Angular UI Bootstrap, and then all of the components with that. And then I personally like SASS. So I'm pretty close to hitting enter all the way through this. There's a couple of changes that I've done. And then I say none. I like to code in standard JavaScript. And I also like to code in standard HTML. Called me old-fashioned, but that's just the way I like it. So at this point, we can actually type gulp serve. I actually believe that this already brought in Bower as well. And if I was to type gulp serve, let me just show you what this does. So this will actually runs the scripts, and then it actually launches an application that looks like this. So this gets us pretty close. It's pretty nice, and we're able to have a working application in a matter of 5 minutes. We're going to be going through and modifying this, so I think this is going to be the hacking part of the session, where we're going to go in and change this and make it look like what you see on that group selfie website. So there we go. We have the serving application. The next thing I like to do is I prefer to upgrade to AngularJS, but I'm not going to do it just because it's going to take time out of this session. But just know that I prefer that everyone upgrade to the latest version. Here's what I do want to do, which is I want to install Bootstrap. This thing called Boot Swatch, which actually allows you to bring in other themes. And this is also will illustrate, in my opinion, a flaw in the Gulp or the Yeoman generator, because it kind of does it in a way where it's really hard to bring in Boot Swatch, but I'll show you how to fix that. And then we're also going to be pulling in Font Awesome, which I like a lot. So we're going to bring in Boot Swatch. I'm going to bring in Font Awesome. So ngFormio is the form renderer. Think of this as the library that takes that JSON schema that I'm telling you about, and on most of these I usually just pick the one that's grabbing the latest version. Typically, it takes that JSON schema and renders it, and then something that helps with authentication as well as routing within Form.io is this thing called ngFormio helper. We're going to install that as well. That shouldn't take very long. Angular came out with 1.51. They must have done that today. All right, so now the next thing that we need to do is we need to add those dependencies to our project. Before I actually do this, what I'd like to show you is what the project looks like. All right, so I know this is really hard to see, so let's actually just kind of take a look at what this is. These are the files that the Yeoman generator created. We have an index.html file, so it did all of this for me. So I've got a lot of scaffolding here that I don't have to worry about. It also uses Gulp. We'll get into that here in a little bit. You see a lot of this meta tags throughout. So we have like this build CSS, this Bower CSS. This is using a tool called WireDep. And what that does is it takes all of your Bower dependencies and it like wires it up into the HTML. It's pretty nice. We have some developers at Form.io that have some pretty harsh opinions about WireDep. So I think it's good. I like it, but it can bite you every now and then. So just keep that in mind. And also this is really nice too. So this is like a build tag, and this tells the build engine. So these comments are actually important to the build routines, because this says, hey, when you run build, I want you to take everything that's in the source tag and I want you to compile it into a vendor tag. So this is taking all the Bower dependencies and actually what it does is it says, I want you to take what's inside of here and compile it into vendor. And this is doing like partials for like templates and stuff. It's really nice where you can write HTML templates and it actually compiles them using the template cache within Angular. It does all of that for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to open this thing, and there's an index.module in here. This is where you actually bring in all of your module dependencies. So going back here, I'm just going to copy these two, which is the Form.io renderer, as well as the Formio helper. So I'm just going to add those to that. I'm going to hit save. And so now whenever I boot this application up, it's now going to pull in Form.io, and I'm going to be able to do some stuff with that. So now let's actually make some changes. There's some things that I don't like about what this Angular, this Yeoman generator does. One of them is it looks like they kind of hacked it up a little bit to try and get fonts to work. One example is if you go into this Bower.json here, you'll see they did this thing called overrides, where overrides allows you to take any Bower dependency and override what files it brings in. And to me, this is a hack. If you're creating a bunch of overrides, something's not right. I know some libraries you have to do that, but a lot of this stuff you can accomplish with build routines, which is going to get us into the Gulp stuff. We are going to be creating some Gulp routines in this session. To start off with, I'm going to get rid of this just because I'm going to show you a better way to do that. Next thing we're going to do is we're not going to exclude bootstrap.js. You need bootstrap.js in particular whenever you're resizing the screen and you want that drop down on the little buttons that says, drops down the menu. That will not work if you don't have bootstrap.js included. So if you're actually using this generator and you notice that whenever on really small screens that little icon up there on the far right doesn't bring down your menu, this is the number one reason why that doesn't work. So we're going to fix that. So we're going to go into Gulp, and there's a comp file. And inside here, you'll see that they're excluding bootstrap.js from the Wired app. It's beyond me why they did this. So we're gonna get rid of it. I'll probably at some point make a pull request to fix all of these in that generator, but for now, we just have to go through and fix it manually. I do understand why they're excluding Bootstrap CSS. And the reason why they're doing that is because they're wanting to use SASS to compile their Bootstrap. Albeit I hate the way they did it because we're going to do it much better here in a little bit. But they're doing that because they don't want to pull in the Bootstrap CSS because they're already using SASS to pull in the SASS dependencies, which will compile the CSS during the build routines. So the next thing we're going to do is, this is a change that I would highly recommend you doing because this gives you a lot of power to bring in the SASS files in Bootstrap that you want. In this case, we're using boot swatch, which will allow us to change the template altogether. And for those of you who have not seen boot swatch, it's really neat. We use it a lot, and it provides a number of themes for Bootstrap. So you can change it to like a Cosmo theme, which looks like Metro, Windows Metro. There's like Cyborg. It's just some really cool, you can really change the look and feel. And what I like to do is start with a boot swatch theme that gets you fairly close to what you're after from a look and feel. And then you kind of just tweak the variables within SASS to just really fine tune it the way you want to fine tune it. And I'll show you how to do that too. So let me go over to my master here and go into my source app. And here's basically the code that allows you to bring in a particular theme. So I'm going to go over here to my app, and I'm going to select all of this and delete it and replace it with that. So let me explain what this is doing. This first line here is actually going into the boot swatch theme Cosmo. So here I'm picking the theme Cosmo. So we can actually look at what that looks like. So boot swatch is right here. It has a bunch of themes. And then I'm bringing in the variables. This is also a great way for you guys to realize what variables can I change or what variables can I tweak. They did a really good job documenting what variables are available, and it's all in this variables file. How many know about this? Is this a nugget that you guys were familiar with? Yeah? Okay, so we got some new nuggets going on here. That allows me to bring in the variables, and here is what it looks like if you want to fine tune the colors. So I can change these things. And what's really cool is the boot swatch will use these as the primary colors. And then a lot of stuff will actually use this lighten or darken on those primary colors to make things, to create the variants. And that allows you to get a really beautiful looking website with very minimal effort. And here I'm actually bringing in the Bootstrap CSS. Then I have to do the boot swatch CSS. And then here I'm actually bringing in Font Awesome. So this is getting me to a point where I'm going to be building and including the CSS in my main app CSS of all the Bootstrap stuff. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually modify the font's Gulp task. I think this is going to illustrate their hack. They ended up hacking it to get it to work. And we're going to fix it by changing the font's task to be this. So I'm going to go into Gulp. Another nice thing that this generator does is it modifies all of my tasks so that they're easy to get to and understand where they are. So Let me copy and paste this, and then I'll explain what this Gulp task is doing. So in Gulp, you basically define new tasks this way. You type gulp.tasks, and then whatever you want to name the task. In this case, what is our objective? Our objective is to take all of the fonts available in our application, and we want to push them into a special folder called dist. Dist is going to be our distribution folder, where we basically have a redistributable application that we can deploy anywhere. So let's read this. This is taking a source, so Gulp source. It's bringing in two paths. One is the Bootstrap SASS fonts, and the other one is the font awesome fonts. And what it's doing here is it's actually compiling them together. It's making sure it only gets fonts. That's what the filter is. And it's pushing those to the destination of the path dist, that's a dist folder, in the subdirectory of fonts. We can run this by itself, which is what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go to my command line, and I'm going to type gulp fonts. And whenever I type that, this gulp fonts, that'll actually look for the gulp task with the same name and execute it. What's great about Gulp is I can actually chain these things together. So if I were to say Gulp fonts and I hit enter, what that's doing now is that went and found all my fonts, and it pushed it to a new folder called dist. You see it just showed up. Now if I were to look at my dist folder, I've got a nice clean folder with all of my Bootstrap fonts as well as my Font Awesome fonts all in the same folder. And that was done from this magical 4 lines of code that you see here. That's the power of Gulp. So now what we're going to do is we need to change the server. So whenever I type gulp serve, that allows me to look at the application, and we should see the fonts in there as well. And I think this is why they added the hack into the Bower overrides, is they were trying to get the wire depth to bring in fonts. I think I'm not sure actually, to be honest, what they were doing. But this is actually how you're supposed to do it, where you can actually fix the problem. This might be an image. Yeah, it is. I'm just going to go over to my server in my master here. I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to go over into my server here. And you'll see that they don't include the fonts folder. So what this is doing is this allows me to type gulp serve, which I'm going to do right now. And all of those paths are now available for my server. And so when I type gulp serve, this is actually a way that I can debug the application. And look, oh, we have a nice, beautiful new theme as well. Everything looks prettier in my opinion. We're using that Metro theme. But you'll notice all of the fonts are there. Everything is the way it should be. We haven't actually broken anything. In my opinion, it's a much better structure for the application. I'm not a big fan on what they did with the nav bar in this application. And the reason why I did this is because I want to kind of walk through all of the changes I made to it so that when you guys are trying to do this at home, you're not kind of lost on why did he do it this way. If you actually look inside of the application in the meetup, you'll notice that they have inside of the app folder, they have this thing called components, where they are basically bringing in a bunch of components. I totally agree with having components like Malarkey or having a GitHub contributor component. To me, that makes sense. Creating a component for the nav bar seemed a little bit odd to me, because really a nav bar is just markup. I mean, there's really not much logic behind it. So my opinion was to just, you know what, we can make this cleaner by just getting rid of these components, because I don't need all these other things in here. I like having my code clean and with a minimal amount of variance as possible. So we're just going to delete that components folder. So it just flat out doesn't include it. And then we're going to go over here. This is my master. Here's the nav bar that I was telling you about. And we're just going to copy that. And we're going to place that nav bar right inside the index.html file. Right here, we're going to replace this div UI view with the nav bar plus the UI view with the class of container. This also makes it, in my opinion, look better, because now the nav bar spans the entire width of the screen, whereas before it was kind of boxed into a set width. And also I have a better idea as to what's going on. I don't have to dig and look for my nav bar. It's part of the markup, so just include it in the markup. So if we actually take a look at what that looks like, so going back to my app, what's great about using this generator as well, gulp serve, you notice I typed gulp serve, and I made that change and I didn't have to refresh the browser. What's awesome is that I can be actively developing this thing, and I can have the browser over on this screen, and as I'm developing, making changes, it detects when a file is changed, and it automatically reloads the server to show all of the changes that you've just made. So we just changed the nav bar, boom, I didn't have to refresh the page, it's there. If I go back to my command line, you'll see that Gulp, what it did, it's listening for files, it found one that was changed, and then it said reloading browsers. I didn't do that. This Gulp serve did that for me. So it's a real big nicety to have. So things are coming along. We're starting to get an app that's kind of coming together, in my opinion. It's like, this looks pretty good. This is what I'd like to see when I'm logged into the app. Let's actually do something to add authentication into this app. So I want people to register. I want people to sign up. And only whenever they sign up and register, then they land on this page. This is where I'm going to show the power of Form.io. Another thing I did do is I moved all of the views to the views folder. For now, what I'll probably end up doing is just copying all the views and placing them inside of, I'm just going to copy them from my master here, and I'll explain all of these views as we're talking through this. I'm just trying to be quick so that we're not, I think I put it inside source. So there we go, there's all of our views. Let's talk about how do we get those into distribution format. And this will talk about a little bit about Gulp. Here we're going to be creating a new task. I just added a new folder, and that folder is called views. And this view has all of my views in it. So here's all the views that Angular would have. So here's like my auth page. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But now, whenever I type Gulp build on this thing, it's going to build my dist folder. And you see right here, here's my dist. It's going to build this dist folder, but it's not going to include the views folder because we didn't tell it to, the build to include it. We have to explicitly tell it to do everything. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add a new task called views. And let me actually go to my build. I think I put that in build, and I think you can just put it right here underneath other. I'm going to call it views. Let me tell you what this is doing. We can talk through this. This is saying that whenever I type Gulp views in my command line, what it's going to do is it's going to go and look for everything within the views path. So that's here. It's going to look everything in there, and it's going to pipe that to the dist folder underneath the subdirectory views. So now I can actually go in here. I'm going to hit Control C. I can type Gulp views now, and that will now run my Gulp views task, which you'll see, there they are. They just showed up. Now I want it to do that during the build. And this is another powerful thing about Gulp is I can now that I've created this task, I can chain tasks together. And I want it so that when I type Gulp build, I also want it to build the views, and I want it to move the views where they need to be in the dist. And so all I have to do is just type the name and add that there. And now when I type Gulp build, the views will also get sucked into the dist folder, and everything's going to be in this nice little package the way that I want them to be. Let's get into some fun stuff. We're going to build an app. We're going to have user authentication. And so this is where we're going to be doing some stuff inside of Form.io. So the very first thing that you'll need to do is you'll need to create a user account in Form.io, and you'll need to create a project. So inside of Form.io, just go and click on login register, and this is a page that you'll see. So you can, if you guys want to learn a little bit about Form.io, I encourage you to go walk through the 5-minute tutorial. I think you're going to pick up on a lot of things just by me walking through it. So I'm not going to go into too much detail and give you this spiel because I'm going to show it to you. What we're going to be doing is creating this group selfie app. So the app itself is going to be a project within Form.io. We separate everything out into projects. Here we have an application for service tracker as an example. Like this is a use case where, let's say you're building an app for a company that has a lot of service personnel, and they're maintaining equipment, and they need to track those people, and those people need to sign in and register what they do. That's what this app would do. In our case, we're going to be building a custom project. So you're going to click on custom project, and we're going to call this group selfie. And we're just going to start with the default project, and I'm going to hit create project. So this actually, what this did a lot for me automatically. The first thing that it did is it actually automatically created an API for me. As you can see here, here's a URL with a subdomain. That's my API, but it also built some resources for me. So resources are the objects of your application. These are like, consider these the database tables, okay? If you guys are used to dealing with MySQL, a resource is a database table. And so we already have user here. But let's actually do something. So right now our users have email and password. Let's say your application, you want to collect their full name. Well, this is a form builder. So all I have to do is drag and drop text field here. Let's type full name. Hit save, and I'm going to save resource. And now, with that one motion, I've actually not only modified the form for the user, but I also added the full name as part of the API. So now it's already ready and configured the API to accept all of the data for that field. So think of it as form building that creates APIs. That's what Form.io does. But once we created the user resource, we can use the user resource by itself. But we also need to think about what forms do we need that consume the resource. Well, already we're talking about two forms, login and register. Those are two different forms that ultimately will end up pointing to the user resource in the back end. So we need to create a login form, and we also need to create a register form. Those are done inside the forms section. So we've already created this for you. Whenever you create a project, it's going to do this for you. I'm just talking you through it. The user login form, for most logins, you want email and password. However, I'll throw this out there that we also offer OAuth. So if you wanted to do login with Facebook, login with Twitter, that's quite as simple as dragging and dropping a button onto your form saying login with GitHub. You even do login with GitHub and changing the action to OAuth. And by just doing that, you now have OAuth capabilities within your application. I mean, we try to make it about as easy as it possibly can get. If you can build the form in Form.io, you can do some really amazing stuff and add a lot of complexities. So now we have to talk about, we have a form for login. What is this going to do when they submit the form? Whenever that is involved, you're talking about actions. This is where you would create an action that would authenticate, and this is a login action. And the login action currently is authenticating against a user resource, and then you do some field mappings. Okay? Let's look at the user register form. Right now it's email and password because we didn't include our new field in there. But let's go ahead and include the new field because I want them to include their full name whenever they register. I go click on existing resource fields, click on user, and then drag and drop the full name there and hit save. There's one other thing that I need to do, and I need to go look at my actions, because registering includes an additional action. If you think about it, what registering really does is it's doing a save, then login. It's saving the resource to the user resource table, and then it's authenticating them. So that's two different actions that this is performing. And I just need to make sure that my save action is including the full name whenever it saves the user. I'm going to hit save, and now I've got a login that'll populate the full name, email, and password, as well as log them in whenever they hit register. So now that we have our user register forms and our user resource form, it's now time that we embed that in our application. To learn how to embed, you can either go to this embed link right next to the form. So let's say we wanted to embed the user login form. We click on this link, and this will kind of give you a little bit of a how-to on how to get this into your app. What it really boils down to is a single line of code, and I think this is one very powerful piece of Form.io, which is we've taken all of this complexity and boiled it down to a single HTML element that's as easy as embedding an image. If you can embed an image into your website, you can embed an entire working I/O form. That's the idea behind it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take this embed code, we're going to put it inside of our application, and you're going to see how it's just going to work. It's just going to know what to do. It's going to log into my app, and then I'm authenticated using JWT tokens. Another thing that I encourage you guys to do is go to this launch page. And this launch page will talk about local app development and kind of walk you through as well on how to change the app URL, like if you're using the default template. We're building a template from scratch, but if you're using one of our pre-existing templates, that's really helpful information. So let's go back to our application and get the login in place. To do that, I'm going to actually look at my views. I actually created 3 views. One is the tab. So you have a login and you have a register tab. So if I was to go to the actual group selfie application here, you'll notice we have a login tab and we have a register tab. Not sure why it's doing that. It's probably because it's login, register. Okay, so we have 2 different tabs that are bringing in 2 different forms. All right, so let's actually go and look at our app. We have 2 different tabs, and I've already got this, so login, register. And then I'm including a new UI view. This is creating a nested view in Angular. This utilizes nested states where you use like user period, login, user period, register. But let's take a look at what the login form looks like. It's that. And because we built our own app, all I have to do is replace this with my API. So let me go to that real quick. Here's the API that I created. User login, embed. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste that here. And then under the register, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go to the user register form, embed, copy the user register form. It's not going to show anything yet because I haven't registered the paths. So let's talk about how to do that. With Form.io, we also provide you a number of helpers that makes the registration, token handling, as well as state handling very easy for user authentication. So that's what we're going to do next. So we've already created the auth page. That's what we just did. So if you're walking through my presentation, we just did this. We just did that, the login page, as well as the register page. The next thing we need to do is we need to register this thing called the Formio auth provider. And this tells Form.io how are you configuring this app for authentication. And it really boils down to just a number of lines of code that's fairly easy to remember to configure your application. So let me just go copy and paste this, and then I'll kind of walk you through how that works. So inside of config, my config.index.config, I'm just going to copy this code, take that over to my app, config, and I'm just going to paste it there. So let's talk a little bit about what this is doing. So whenever you're using Form.io, there is a Form.io provider and there's a Form.io auth provider. There's also a Form.io resource provider, but we haven't got that far yet. The Form.io provider allows you to configure the API. So where do you want to point the API to this application? I did mention at the very beginning that you can actually spin up Form.io in any infrastructure you want. You can point it. We have Docker containers, so if your company requires you to point this to your own databases, you can spin this up under your own domain, and your application in this situation would then be pointing to your domain, which means these forms are going to be sending data to your API. This is what's important, is the set state. So this is me basically saying that whenever they log in, where do I want them to go afterwards? That's what set states does. This is saying whenever they log in, I want them to go to home afterwards. Whenever they register, I want them to go home afterwards. I can actually point them to two different locations if I wanted to. And these are application states. Okay, that's important to state, like in UI, the UI router states. And then I can also say, I want them to be forced to authenticate. And what this does is this says, if they are not authenticated, if they do not have a token, I want to redirect them back to the auth page at all times. They must be authenticated. Most of the apps that we build for our customers, we have this set because we're talking about data management applications. They have like the login page is the only page you see unless you log in, and then you see the data management system behind it. This is actually registering the UI router states. So here I'm saying I want to register a login state underneath the user path, and I want this to be the URL, and I want to do a register path, and I want this to be the URL. So anyway, once you've done that, there's one more thing we need to do in order to initialize our authentication. Is we need to pass in this Formio auth initialize. So the way we do that is we just use one more line of code, which is bringing in that Formio auth, and we call a method called a init. So let's go do that. In fact, I think I can copy this one. Yep, I can. So I'm going to go to the run here. I'm just going to plop that right here, which is going to initialize my Formio auth provider. And once I do that, I should now, if all went well, I should now have logins working within my application. I'm going to share this is the right one. That's not the right one. Let me go to my app. Oh, I need to type gulp serve. I forgot about that. So now if I type gulp serve, and if I run that, it's logged into a previous state. So now what we have is we have login and register. And guess what? This actually works. So I can register for a user account. So I'm going to type login. And once I register, it went to the home page. That's the page it went to. And I'm also authenticated. It knows who I am. I have this logout button. And I can log out. And when I log out, it takes me back to this page. And because I registered, I can now log in. So now I've basically got authentication, login, register working in a fairly short amount of time. So now what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about Amazon S3. Because once we actually have a somewhat of a working application, I think now's the time for us to figure out, okay, how do we get this up to a live environment so that I can deploy this app and we can actually look at it live. To do that, we're going to use Amazon S3. Now, I could show you the Amazon UI and walk you all the way through it, but I really want to cover as much material here as possible. So what I've done is I've taken a lot of screenshots, and I'm going to walk you through those. And in the end, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you kind of how group selfie works whenever I can type gulp deploy, and you'll see it deploy, and all your files will end up getting uploaded to S3. So one important thing to take note of here is that you'll actually be creating 2 buckets when you're dealing with an application, especially when you're building an application in this manner. One is actually going to be the bucket to host the app. You need to push these HTML files, the CSS files, the JavaScript files, and all the like. So that's bucket 1. The next bucket we need to create is the bucket that'll contain the files for file uploading, because you guys are going to be taking selfies, and that's going to do a direct upload to S3. It's another important thing to take note of. Our file system, you're not sending a file through Form.io. You're not uploading a file to Form.io. You're actually uploading directly to Amazon S3. So that's how you scale an app, right? You can scale an app by letting Amazon S3 handle the file upload and handle the scale of that. And what Amazon S3 does is whenever it's done uploading, it hands you all of the information you need about that file to look it up later, and that's what you store. It's just text data. And so then you're no longer dealing with files. So when you log into Amazon, you're going to be dealt with a horrendous UI. You're going to see a ton of icons. And it's real important to find which icons are you actually clicking on here. We're going to start off by creating a couple of users. When you create users in Amazon S3, you're using this thing called IAM, which is the Identity and Access Management. Go click on that. So you're going to click on the users link there, and that's going to actually take you to the users section where you can actually create a new user. We're going to create 2 users, but I'm going to create the files one first. This is the one that's actually going to contain the files for the application. And so I create a new username. Take note of the access keys. Write them down somewhere because Amazon S3 will not show them to you again. Once you close that browser page, you can't get them back. So take note of them, copy and paste them into a very secure notepad. I recommend using the key access within Mac computers. It requires a passcode to get into and read some secured notes. Just put it there. And then what we're going to do is we need to attach a policy to that user that'll give your gulp. This is whenever we type gulp deploy. I want that user to be able to push and upload all of the files into that bucket that they want. And to do that, we're going to give them full Amazon S3 access. Just click that and hit attach policy, and then you should be good to go. The next user we're going to create is going to be one called group selfie upload. This is going to be the user that's going to be used for uploading files. You want this one to be a little bit more locked down. You do not want to give this user full S3 access. Just give them very refined access, and I'll show you kind of how to do that here in a minute. Again, take note of the security credentials. And then what we'll need to do is make sure we copy this string up there. It's the ARN. We're going to need that later whenever we configure the bucket. We're going to be writing some JSON strings, and we're going to need to make sure we copy and paste that in those strings. So let's go and create our 2 buckets. Okay, again, we're creating 2 buckets here. The first one is the domain for your app or wherever the domain. So I went and registered the domain groupselfie.us. I like that domain, groupselfie.us. And that's the domain that I registered in the S3 bucket. And you need to make sure you name your bucket the name of the domain. That's important as well when you're doing static web hosting with Amazon S3. And then for that, you're going to want to make sure you enable website hosting, and then you need to provide an index.html file. And this will actually turn Amazon S3 into a static file a web server, a static hosting web server, much like GitHub Pages. I like using GitHub Pages, but I like S3 better because I can put CloudFront in front of this. And what CloudFront allows me to do is it allows me to have CDN distribution around the world of my website. And I can also attach a security SSL cert to it. And so I can get that SSL up there in my app. Let's actually create the files bucket. So the files.groupselfie.us. And here we're actually going to need to attach a policy to the bucket. This is where we tell Amazon S3, here's who I'm going to allow you to upload, and here are the credentials that they need to have to do that. And to do that, you click on properties, and then you actually click on this add bucket policy. And here's what this is pretty much copy and paste, except for a few things. The first thing that is not copy and paste is this right here. This is that thing that I told you guys to copy earlier, which is that ARN string from the user. You're going to paste whatever your username is or your ARN, and you're going to paste it there. What does this do? This is telling Amazon, I want to allow uploading of files to that user. They should be able to get, put, and put objects. And this is something that also needs to be modified when you create your bucket. This is the bucket name. Really, all you need to do is change this to the bucket name of whatever bucket you have. And I think everything else should stay the same. We also want to allow public read access to our bucket. So anybody who creates a selfie, you guys should be able to view those selfies. We also at Form.io allow private files. I'm going to throw that out there. So if you need to upload private sensitive files, you can get rid of this, and Form.io can handle that as well. The only difference is you don't want to do that for an app that's has like a million resources on the page, because every single one of those requires an auth token, and you're basically hitting Form.io servers to get those auth tokens. So the way you do that is you say allow public read, and here's the bucket name, and that's what you do there. That makes this bucket open to the public as like a public read, but only people with access can upload. Not everyone can upload, but only the public can read it. And then the other thing that's really important is this cross-domain access. This tells the bucket, I only want people that are coming from this certain domain, which I'll show you how that works here in a minute, to actually have access to this. So if some hacker from some other local host is trying to upload files or even view files, it's not going to allow them because they're not coming from the website. And that you're just going to change this right here to the name of your bucket. So moving on, this is where we actually add the course configuration. This is that cross policy. And that looks like this. You're just going to copy and paste this and replace this with your domain. You can put star there, but I don't recommend it. You can put star there if you're like testing it from your local host, and I think you can put localhost as a cross policy. I think you can. But I don't even recommend that, because that basically means anybody can have a localhost website and hit the servers from the localhost. So make sure you put your domain there. And then at that point, we are now ready to configure Form.io for Amazon S3 access. So Form.io makes this really easy. You can go in your project settings, and you just click on project settings. I can show you. So like right here, you have project settings. You click on that, and then we have a number of things, and one of those is file storage. We have two file storage providers. One is Dropbox, the other is S3. And you just copy and paste those secret keys there. This is the secret keys for the upload user. So you created two keys. One was for the files user, and the other one was for an upload user. These are for the upload user. You put those here. Let's talk about adding resources to our application. So we're actually going to go create a group resource within Form.io, and I'm too tempted just to show it to you. So we're actually going to create a group object. I just want to show you how easy this is. I mean, it really is not hard at all. So we're going to create a group. This is like whenever you're in the app, I want to create a new group. I want to give it a name. I want to give it a title. Those are text fields. So here's title. I want to give it a name like that. Let's call it name. And I think I said like status, open and close. So you can do a select drop down. Is this an open group or is this a closed group status? So this is so I can say open, closed, And I'm done creating my group resource. So in a matter of 1 minute, I've basically built an entire REST API. That's what's really cool about this. I've got this entire REST API. If I actually want to go look at it within Swagger.io, I can. If I click on that, this will show you all of the APIs I have available now, and there's my group one. And this is actually a full Swagger implementation, so I can actually see how do I access this thing, what's available to me, and the like. It's pretty powerful. Another thing I'll need to do is make sure I can configure the access for this group. And to do that, I need to say I want authenticated people to be able to create new groups, and I also want them to be able to read all the existing groups that are out there. So we have a really robust roles and permission system, but this is how you do it. You can create new roles if you wanted to within your application, but for the most part, we're saying here I want people to create their own. I want them to update their own, read their own. I want them to delete their own. And I only want them to read everyone else's. I do not want to give them access to update all submissions, because that'll give them access to update anybody's group. And now I hit Save Changes. So now that I've created a group, the next thing I need to do is I'm going to create a selfie. So I'm going to click on New Resource, Selfie. And the very first thing that I want to do is I want to relate this selfie to whatever group it was posted in, okay? And to do that, we actually use a different type of field called a resource field. And that's this resource field which will allow me to form like this connection between this selfie object and the group that it's assigned to. So this is going to be the group that the selfie is assigned to, and I select group here and I hit save. That one little thing that I did there actually created a nested resource. Now all my selfies will have a group association with it, and I can actually query selfies, hey, what selfies are associated with this group, by just adding that to my filters. Because now every time I create a selfie, it's going to have a group associated with it. And the very last thing that I need to do now is attach a picture. That is a file component, and I just select Amazon S3. I'm done with my selfie resource. So in a couple of minutes, I've actually created a selfie resource that'll also relate itself to whatever group it's being associated with. And I can also assign permissions here as well. I need to assign the same permissions. Authenticated, authenticated, authenticated. Hit Save Changes. And now I'm essentially done setting up Form.io so that I can do groups as well as selfies and be able to create new groups, and inside that be able to show off all the selfies. Moving back over to the application, we need to make sure that within our group page, we want to make sure that we only show the selfies that are related to that group. So to do that, we're going to use this very special component called the Formio Resource Provider. This is a special provider that basically registers all of the paths necessary to create all of the CRUD operations for a resource within your application. So you have create, read, update, delete, and even index. There's a lot of different resource paths that you have to worry about dealing with whenever you're dealing with resources. And this does all of that for you and allows you to override certain controllers, such as view, the create controller, the view controller. So think of this as like a way of setting it up with a bunch of defaults that gets you pretty close and then allows you to have fine-grained manipulation of the resource. So we're going to do the group one first. And we're going to do that within the route. Config. So right here, you'll see where I'm actually registering my group resource. I'm going to copy this. This is my master. I'm going to bring it over here, config. I'm going to plop it here, and let me just explain a little bit what this is doing. So this is saying I want to register the group resource. I want it to be at this URL, or actually this is the API URL for that group. So if my API URL, if I called it something else in Form.io, I'd have to call it something else here. What this is doing, this is the UI router state. And this actually will take that core state and it'll add a group.view, group.edit, group.delete, group, create group, and index group. It'll create like 6 states for you automatically, so it really saves you a lot of time. And then it also allows you to provide your own templates if you want to override the default. By default, the view will show the form already filled out. And then you can actually do some pretty cool stuff, such as I want to default the status to be open when I create new groups. So I can do that by just, there's a, the Formio resource provider automatically adds a submission object to the state. And as you modify that, you can control what the default value should be within the form from the app if you wanted to. So you can do some logic here to like even determine intelligent defaults if you wanted that. And here's where I'm actually viewing the group. And inside of the group, I'm actually hitting the API for the selfie. So here I'm hitting the selfie submission. So here I'm getting all of the submissions. There's a little hack here. We have to limit it. I'm providing a limit of 100. You can do pagination in Form.io. It's pretty easy, but don't have time to get that deep, but you can. And here's where I'm saying you can provide the group ID to filter all of the submissions to only show selfies with that group. And so this will actually bring up all the submissions. And then there's one other special thing I need to do, which is provide the JWT token within the header, which there's a provider here for you as well called Form.io that allows you to do that and provide the token. And then I'm assigning all of these selfies for that group based on the result of the query. So now what I'd like to do is add the one for the selfie. So the actual selfie resource. When you go create a new selfie, I want it to, the one thing that I really want to do here is I just want to, instead of going to the selfie, by default, the resource provider will send them to the selfie view. Here I'm actually overriding that to send them to the group view. And this also kind of illustrates a powerful thing about Form.io. You have full control and access to form submissions as they're happening within the application. So once a submission is made, I can even get access to the actual submission itself. This is the entire submission object for that selfie. So I can even do some other crazy stuff. I could take the data from that selfie, navigate to another state. I can provide additional stuff. And here I'm saying go to the group view that the selfie is. So here I'm saying once it's submitted, go to the group view. And so now we just need to add those views. So the main view looks like this. So this is the main view that they see whenever they hit the page. I think I've already added these here, so I don't need to copy and paste. So basically this is HTML at this point. I'm saying, hey, you currently don't have any selfie groups. I'm doing a LI list here of all my groups that I'm associated with. This actually is smart enough to where it'll show me all groups that I've either created or all groups that I have a selfie in. So I have a list of all the groups that I've either created a selfie in or I've created. And then there's two buttons over here that'll say, hey, go to those groups. Here's what the main view code looks like. So we actually need to copy and paste this. This will actually bring in all of the logic here. So I need to go to route. And I need to add the state of home. So instead of using the default, so right now state of home doesn't really do anything. I'm going to change that. So now the state of home does this, which is it sets up the initial groups. It hits the APIs or Form.io APIs. And here's that owner tag that I was telling you about. So here I'm saying give me all of those with where I'm set as the owner. And then the root scope actually has whenever you log in, your user object is assigned to assigned to the root scope user. So I actually have access to my logged in user. So even if you have like fields like first name, last name, and I want to put those up there on the app, like welcome Travis Tidwell, I can do that using that. There's my headers. And then at this point, I'm basically just creating all of the groups that are mine. And here I'm getting all the groups that I've created. So this is getting all the groups that I have a selfie in, and this is getting all groups that I created. And then we also need to add the group view, which looks like this. I've already done this because I copied all the views. The group view will iterate through all the selfies and just show the ng source of the selfie data picture. This is what Form.io provides you when you upload a file to S3, and it just gives you the URL. And then finding groups, we need to do this as well. So we want people to be able to find new groups by just typing in the name of the group. That also needs a controller. Sorry, I'm going fast, guys. There's just a lot to cover. And so all this is doing is just registering a new method so that whenever I type inside the text field, it's actually hitting the query. It's submitting, hitting the query of the data name. This is the name of the group, and it's finding that group name and returning a result of all the groups. Actually, it doesn't return a result. What it does is you have to know the name of the group. So I've added like some faux protection here, where you can't add a selfie to a group unless you know the name of the group, and you type it in and hit go. And it'll find it, and then it'll send you to that group page if it finds it. So that's that. Let's actually run this and see what this looks like. So gulp serve. Oh, there is one thing I do need to change that I messed up on. And that is all of these have a URL associated with it. So like right up here, I have this app URL. I just need to change that to my app. Let me get my API real quick. It's right here. And I'm going to copy that, and then I need to copy it. I think I've already copied and pasted it in the config right there as well. So now it should have reloaded my browser. I hope so. I'm just going to refresh just in case. So let me log in real quick and just see what we got here, because I've already created an account. So now we have my group. You can either join a group, and so I can actually go start a group selfie. So this is actually loading my group form from Form.io. So this is dynamically going out and finding, just to illustrate how really cool that is. I can actually add a new field in runtime. So let's say I just wanted to have like a text area. Where's that? Let's say I wanted to add a description to my group. Just by modifying the form in Form.io and going over here and hitting refresh, it's actually pulling in real time all the changes I made to Form.io. And it's doing that through that single line of code. So imagine you've compiled your app and you've got it deployed to millions of people, and you need to make a change. Now you can make a change without going to the App Store. You just change the form, and they'll pull in the new JSON schema, render the form, and everyone's happy. That's the power of dynamic JSON powered forms. Is that these are rendering in real time. It's actually going out, hitting the API, and rendering the form in the front end. And this actually works. So let me just do meetup. And you notice it set the status to open. It's hitting my controller. And so then I hit submit. I can now go create a new selfie. This won't work because I haven't configured my S3 bucket on this project, but if it does, it would work. And then there's my group that's set up here. I can edit that group, change things, hit submit. So you got full CRUD capabilities here. On the group, I can also delete it. So, and as well as create selfies, and all of those selfies will be contained. If you want an idea of kind of this in runtime, go check out groupselfie.us. And so as you see that, this got a couple of selfies going on here. Did any of you guys? Hey, look at that. So we had a couple of people add a couple of selfies to our meetup group. And then we also have, here's our Form.io group. And basically this allows me to say, hey guys, I've created a group. Everyone pull out your things and take a selfie. And everyone will take a selfie, and it'll, pretty cool. Let's talk a little bit about deployment, and then we'll be done. So the one thing that you'll need to install is this thing called Gulp S3. This is a Gulp way to connect to an S3 bucket. You just type npm install save Gulp S3. And then there is one task that we need to add, which is just deploy. So I'm going to go to my Gulp here. And I usually put it in the core Gulp file. I usually have a thing here called Gulp deploy. And so what is this doing? This is actually doing a build first. So when I type Gulp deploy, this is actually doing a build. And then from that build, it's actually taking what's compiled into the dist folder and then pushing it out to Amazon S3. So I actually, from a single command line interface, I can build my app, and now I can deploy my app by just typing Gulp deploy. There's one thing that I have to include, which is a AWS JSON file. That looks something like this, where the secret and the key are the secret and key that you guys got from Amazon S3, which is the files user in Amazon S3. Please also do this. Do not forget to do this. Do not commit that file to Git, so add it to your git ignore. I hate that I have to explicitly say this, but you do. So you actually have to add this. Otherwise, you're just running the risk of committing it. And then that allows you to deploy the app. This is what it looks like. So I can actually go to, here's the group selfie application. So just to show you, I can type Gulp deploy. And so this will actually do a build. So it's actually doing a build. It tells me if there's JS hint errors. It's compiling the distribution. It's building map files. I mean, this thing does all kinds of cool stuff. It also compresses my index.html files. It compresses my JavaScript files, compresses my CSS, and then it deploys out to Amazon S3. So one single line of code, I've essentially deployed my application and updated it to prod. And you can also create multiple variants of your deploy command. So we actually use gulp deploy to deploy to test. And I type gulp deploy :prod, and that'll actually deploy to prod. So within my command line, we can just push these things wherever we want to. And it's very easy to manage. Like I don't have to worry about a Hudson server, Jenkins, or anything like that. I just use command line and get it out there, and it's really easy. It's also an easy way to manage. Like if you guys are dealing with like hundreds of customers, and each customer has their own S3 bucket, you just commit the gulp deploy to your repo, like everything except for the JSON file. It basically will know how to route their files to whatever bucket they need. As long as you keep your credentials, it'll deploy it. So that's it, guys. Have fun with Form.io, building, deploying, and guess what? In one hour, we built. Well, actually, it was about an hour and a half, wasn't it? in an hour and a half, we went from inception to deployment, including building an entire application. And I think that just highlights the power of all of the tools involved, including Form.io. I hope you guys go out and check out Form.io and try it for yourself. And also give us feedback. We're very open to receiving good and bad feedback from you guys. We're trying to make this platform as good as it possibly can be. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks.